When the most powerful alien empire in the galaxy offered humanity peace, prosperity, and purpose in exchange for freedom, Earth said one word that would change the fate of the cosmos. No, the massive crystalline ship materialized in Earth's orbit like a divine apparition, its faceted hull gleaming with an otherworldly blue light that cast ethereal shadows across the planet below. The vessel was the size of Manhattan, a testament to the technological prowess of the Galactic Confederation, a union of 12,000 civilized worlds that had brought order to this corner of the galaxy for over 50 millennia. On the ship's bridge, Consul Zeth Prime stood before a holographic display showing Earth's continents in perfect detail. The consul was an imposing figure, even by galactic standards, nearly 9 feet tall, with 4 arms and skin like polished obsidian. His species, the Kethmori, had been the first to achieve faster-than-light travel and had naturally assumed leadership of the Confederation. They prided themselves on their efficiency, their logic, and their ability to integrate new species into galactic civilization with minimal disruption. Primitive world designation, Terra 3, Zeth Prime announced to his bridge crew, his voice resonating with harmonic overtones that his species used to convey authority. Population, approximately 8 billion bipedal carbon-based life forms. Technological level, barely spacefaring. Nuclear weapons detected, but no energy shields. Primitive rocket propulsion only. This should be ... routine. His aide, a serpentine, Slack named his seer, slithered closer to the display. Consul, the preliminary scans show unusual readings. Their electromagnetic emissions are ... chaotic. Multiple languages, countless competing governments, and their entertainment broadcasts. The aide paused, clearly disturbed. They appear to enjoy fictional depictions of violence and conflict. Zeth Prime waved a dismissive hand. Barbaric tendencies are common among pre-integration species. The Vorthek were cannibals before we civilized them. The Quilimri practiced ritual combat until death. Within a generation of proper guidance, they all learned to appreciate the peace and prosperity of galactic citizenship. The consul had performed this ritual 1,847 times during his career. Each time, the pattern was the same: arrive, demonstrate overwhelming technological superiority, offer the benefits of galactic citizenship, and accept the inevitable surrender. Most species took between 6 and 18 hours to formally capitulate. The record holder, a particularly stubborn insectoid race called the Threx, had held out for 3 full days before their queen finally saw reason. Begin the standard integration protocol, Zeth Prime commanded. Broadcast the welcome message in their dominant languages. I want to be home for the Centennial Harmony Festival. President Sarachan stood in the Situation Room beneath the White House, surrounded by the most powerful military and intelligence leaders in the world. The room hummed with tension as satellite feeds showed the alien vessel hovering serenely above Earth. Every screen in the room displayed the same impossible sight: humanity was no longer alone in the universe. "Ma'am," General Morrison announced, his voice tight with barely controlled anxiety, "we're receiving a transmission on all frequencies simultaneously. It's being broadcast in English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, and approximately 200 other languages." The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at Consul Zeth Prime. His alien features were both majestic and terrifying, for arms moved with fluid grace. His obsidian skin reflected the bridge lights, and his eyes held the confidence of a being who had never known defeat. "Greetings, inhabitants of Terra 3. The consul began, his translated voice carrying an unmistakable tone of benevolent authority. "I am Consul Zeth Prime of the Galactic Confederation. For 50,000 of your years, we have brought peace, prosperity, and purpose to the civilized worlds of this galaxy. Today, we extend that same gift to you." The transmission continued with holographic displays showing gleaming cities on distant worlds, beings of dozens of species living in apparent harmony, and technology that seemed like magic to human eyes, ships that could cross the galaxy in days, medical treatments that could extend life indefinitely, and energy sources that could power entire star systems. Your species shows promise, Zeth Prime continued. You have achieved nuclear technology and limited space travel. You have art, music, and rudimentary science. With proper guidance, you could become productive members of galactic society within a single generation. President Chen felt her jaw tighten. The alien's tone was the same one she might use when talking to a particularly bright child. However, the consul's voice took on a more serious tone. Your current state of political fragmentation and technological primitiveness makes you unsuitable for immediate full citizenship. Therefore, the Confederation offers you protected status under our benevolent guidance. You will surrender your weapons of mass destruction, dissolve your competing governments, and accept the wisdom of our appointed administrators. The holographic display now showed human cities, but transformed. The chaotic architecture was replaced by uniform crystalline structures. The diverse crowds of people were organized into neat, purposeful groups. Everything was clean, efficient, and utterly lifeless. In return, Zeth Prime concluded, you will receive protection from the dangers of the galaxy, access to basic medical and agricultural technologies, and the peace that comes from knowing your place in the greater cosmic order. You have 48 of your hours to formally accept this generous offer. Any attempt at resistance will be met with the minimum force necessary to ensure compliance. The transmission ended, leaving the Situation Room in stunned silence. The next 47 hours were the most intense in human history. Every government on Earth was simultaneously trying to process the same impossible situation. The United Nations held an emergency session that devolved into shouting matches in 17 languages. Military leaders around the world ran scenarios that all ended the same way: complete annihilation. Scientists desperately tried to understand technology that was centuries beyond human comprehension. But while the politicians argued and the generals despaired, something else was happening. In coffee shops and internet forums, in factory break rooms and university lecture halls, in places where ordinary people gathered to make sense of an extraordinary situation, a consensus was emerging. The aliens' message had been broadcast globally, and humanity had heard it clearly. The offer was simple: surrender your freedom, abandon your diversity, accept our control, and in return, you'll be safe, fed, and utterly without purpose. President Chen found herself in the remarkable position of representing not just America, but all of humanity. The other world leaders had unanimously agreed that the response should come from the current UN Security Council president, which happened to be the United States. Mum, her chief of staff, said quietly, the polling data is ... unprecedented. Across every demographic, every nation, every political affiliation, the numbers are essentially identical. Chen looked at the reports streaming in from around the world. From the slums of Mumbai to the penthouses of Manhattan, from the rice fields of Vietnam to the oil rigs of the North Sea, humanity had somehow reached the same conclusion. 97%, ma'am, the chief of staff continued. 97% of respondents say we should reject the offer. The other 3% are mostly people who didn't understand the question. General Morrison leaned forward. Mum, with respect, the people don't understand what they're rejecting. This isn't a negotiation. This is capitulation or extinction. Maybe, Chen replied, staring at the data. But maybe extinction as free humans is better than survival as cosmic pets. She thought about her daughter, currently a sophomore at MIT, studying quantum physics. She thought about her grandfather, who had fought in World War II and always said that some things were worth dying for. She thought about every human who had ever looked at the stars and wondered if we were alone. Never, imagining that when we finally got our answer, it would come with chains. Ma'am, her aide announced, it's time. Consul Zeth Prime stood confidently on his bridge as the appointed time arrived. His staff had prepared the standard integration documents, and transport ships were already being prepared to ferry the new administrators to Earth's surface. The consul had even composed a personal message to the Confederation Council. Noting that this integration had proceeded with remarkable efficiency, Consul, his seer announced, "We are receiving a transmission from the planetary surface. It appears to be coming from their primary governing body." "Excellent," Zeth Prime replied. "Display it on the main screen." The image of President Chen appeared, and the consul immediately noted the primitive nature of her surroundings. No advanced materials, no harmonious architecture, just the crude stone and metal constructions typical of pre-integration civilizations. "Consul, Zeth Prime," President Chen began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "I speak for the people of Earth in response to your offer." Zeth Prime activated his recording systems. The formal acceptance was always worth preserving for the historical archives. On behalf of humanity, Chen continued, "Our answer is no." The word hung in the air like a physical presence. On the bridge of the Confederation flagship, every being froze. In 50,000 years of galactic expansion, through 1,847 successful integrations, that word had never been spoken. "I beg your pardon," Zeth Prime said, his harmonic voice wavering slightly. "No," Chen repeated, her voice growing stronger. "We reject your offer. We reject your protection. We reject your guidance. We choose to remain free." The consul's arms began moving in agitation. You don't understand. This isn't a request. This is an inevitability. Your species lacks the capability to resist. You're probably right, Chen admitted. You can certainly destroy us, but you cannot make us submit. You cannot make us surrender what makes us human. What makes you human? Zeth Prime asked, genuine confusion in his voice. Your chaos, your violence, your inefficiency. Our choice, Chen said simply. Our right to succeed or fail on our own terms. Our freedom to be wrong, to be different, to be ourselves. Zeth Prime ended the transmission and stood in stunned silence. In all his years of service, in all the Confederation's millennia of expansion, this scenario had never occurred. The protocols didn't account for outright rejection. Sir, his weapons officer, a heavily armored Brakel named Stone Render, spoke up. Shall the first charge the planetary pacification systems? The consul hesitated. The standard procedure was clear: overwhelming force, minimal casualties, swift occupation. But something about the humans' response troubled him. There had been no pleading, no bargaining, no attempt to negotiate better terms, just a simple, absolute refusal. His seer, he commanded, conducted deeper analysis of their cultural broadcasts. I want to understand what we're dealing with. The Serpentine aide's head bobbed nervously. Consul, I've been monitoring their communications since the rejection. The response is unprecedented. They're not panicking. They're not rioting. They single quotes read celebrating. Celebrating. Zeth Prime's voice rose to a harmonic shriek. They're celebrating their own impending destruction. Sir, they appear to be viewing this as a victory. Their information networks are filled with statements like we stood up to the galaxy and humanity chose freedom. They're actually proud of their decision. The consul's obsidian skin began to shift to a darker shade, a sign of deep agitation among his species. Show me. The main screen filled with images from Earth. Instead of the expected chaos, they saw something entirely different. People gathered in public squares, not in terror, but in solidarity. Children drew pictures of spaceships with the word nitrogen monoxide written underneath. Musicians composed songs about freedom. Scientists worked frantically not to build weapons, but to preserve human knowledge for whatever came next. They're treating this as their finest hour. His seer reported. They're acting like they've already won. Won. Zeth Prime sputtered. They've chosen extinction over paradise. Sir, the weapons officer interrupted. If I may. There's something else. I've been analyzing their military preparations. They're not building defenses. They're not trying to hide. They're planning to fight. The screen showed images of hastily constructed monuments, messages being recorded for potential future discovery, and preparations that could only be described as ceremonial. Humanity was preparing for a last stand that they knew they couldn't win, and they were doing it with a fierce joy that the galactic civilizations had forgotten existed. "This is impossible," Zeth Prime muttered. "Every species chooses survival. Every intelligent being accepts the logical choice." "Sir," a new voice spoke up from the communication station. "We're receiving another transmission from the planet. This time, the transmission came from multiple sources simultaneously. President Chen was there, but so were dozens of other humans, world leaders, scientists, artists, soldiers, and ordinary citizens from every corner of the globe." "Consul Zeth Prime," President Chen began, "we wanted to clarify something. We're not rejecting your offer out of ignorance or stubbornness. We understand exactly what we're choosing." A young woman stepped forward, Dr. Lisa Park, a quantum physicist from Seoul. "We understand that your technology is superior. We understand that you could destroy us with minimal effort. We understand that resistance is futile." An elderly man, in military uniform, took his place, General David Okafor from Nigeria. "We understand that you've conquered thousands of worlds. We understand that you've never met resistance like this. We understand that you're confused." One by one, humans from around the world stepped forward to address the consul. A teacher from Brazil, a farmer from Kansas, a musician from India, a student from Egypt. Each one spoke the same message in their own words. "We understand what you're offering, and we choose to refuse it." Finally, a young girl, no more than 10 years old, looked directly into the camera. "Mr. Alien, my teacher says you want to take care of us like we're your pets, but we're not pets, we're people. And people get to choose." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in out silence. Zeth Prime realized with growing horror that he had made a fundamental miscalculation. For 50,000 years, the Confederation had succeeded because they offered conquered species something they wanted more than freedom: security. Every species they had encountered had been willing to trade their independence for safety, order, and prosperity. But humanity was different. These bizarre creatures actually valued their freedom more than their lives. They would rather die as themselves than live as someone else's ideal of what they should be. "Sir," Stone Render said quietly, "the fleet is awaiting orders." Zeth Prime looked at the tactical display. 1,000 ships armed with weapons that could crack planets. Against them, a single world of primitives with barely functional space travel. It should have been simple, but for the first time in his long career, the consul found himself hesitating. What was the point of conquering a species that couldn't be conquered? What was the value of subjects who would never truly submit? "Sir," his seer said urgently, "you need to see this." The main screen displayed what appeared to be a children's entertainment program from Earth. Cartoon characters were engaged in various adventures, but the themes were unmistakable: individuals standing up to authority, small groups defeating larger forces, and heroes who chose to fight impossible odds rather than surrender. "This is their children's programming," the aide explained. "They're teaching their young to resist authority, to question power, to fight even when fighting is hopeless." The screen switched to an adult drama historical piece about humans fighting other humans who had tried to conquer them. The protagonists were outnumbered, outgunned, and faced with certain death, but they fought anyway. And somehow, impossibly, they won. "Their entire culture is built around this concept," his seer continued. "They call it underdog victories. They have thousands of stories about weaker forces defeating stronger ones through determination, ingenuity, and sheer refusal to give up." Another screen showed a sporting event, humans engaged in ritualized combat for entertainment. The crowd was cheering loudest for the competitor who was losing, but continued fighting. "They don't just accept defeat," Stone Render observed with something like professional admiration. "They've turned defeat into a virtue. They've made hopeless resistance into an art form." Zeth Prime felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: doubt. "Show me their military history." The screens filled with images of human conflicts throughout history. Thermopylae, where 300 humans held off thousands. The Alamo, where defenders fought to the last man. The Warsaw Ghetto, where humans fought against impossible odds simply to die on their feet rather than live on their knees. Consul, his seer said quietly, I don't think they're going to surrender. Ever. The realization hit Zeth Prime like a physical blow. Every species the Confederation had encountered had been rational. They had weighed the costs and benefits and made the logical choice. But humanity wasn't rational, they were something else. Entirely something that valued intangible concepts over tangible benefits. Sir, the communications officer announced, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Confederation Council. The holographic image of Supreme Coordinator Velanoth appeared, her crystalline form radiating authority. Consul Zeth Prime, we have been monitoring your mission. Explain the delay. Supreme Coordinator. Zeth Prime began carefully, we have encountered an unusual situation. The human species has rejected our offer. Rejected. Velanoth's harmonic voice carried notes of disbelief. That's impossible. All species accept integration when faced with the alternative. This species is different. Supreme Coordinator. They appear to value their freedom more than their survival. Nonsense. Velanoth replied. Apply the standard pacification protocols. Destroy their military capacity. Occupy their major population centers, and install our administrators. They will adapt, but Supreme Coordinator. What if they don't? The question hung in the air like a challenge to the natural order of the universe. What happened next had never occurred in the 50,000-year history of the Galactic Confederation. Consul Zeth Prime, veteran of nearly 2,000 successful integrations, did something unprecedented. He disobeyed a direct order. Supreme Coordinator, he said carefully, I respectfully request permission to conduct additional analysis before proceeding with pacification. Denied. Velanoth replied. Immediately, you have your orders, Consul. Execute them. Yes, Supreme Coordinator. Zeth Prime replied, but he made no move to carry out the commands. After the transmission ended, the bridge crew stared at their commander in shock. Disobedience was not just illegal in the Confederation, it was psychologically impossible for most species. The concept of refusing a direct order from a superior was so foreign that most galactic languages didn't even have words for it. Sir, Stone Render said slowly, your orders. Zeth Prime looked at the tactical display, then at the images of Earth still flowing across the screens. Humans laughing as they prepared for annihilation. Children drawing pictures of spaceships with defiant messages. Ordinary people recording goodbye messages for their families with pride instead of fear. I want to speak to them again, he said. The transmission opened, and once again President Chen's face appeared on the screen. But this time, something was different. The consul's harmonic voice carried notes that his species hadn't used in millennia: uncertainty, curiosity, and something that might have been respect. President Chen, he began, I must ask you something. Do you truly understand what you're choosing? Not just for yourselves, but for your children, for your species. We understand, Chen replied. We're choosing to remain human, but you could have so much more. Perfect health, unlimited lifespans, technology beyond your imagination. Why choose struggle when you could have peace? Chen was quiet for a moment, then smiled sadly. Consul, let me ask you something. In all your 50,000 years of peace and prosperity, when was the last time your people created something beautiful? When was the last time they surprised themselves? When was the last time they did something just because it was right, not because it was logical? The question hit Zeth Prime like a physical blow. He realized with dawning horror that he couldn't answer. The Confederation had achieved perfect efficiency, perfect order, perfect predictability. They had also achieved perfect stagnation. We create many things, he said weakly. We build cities, we expand. You build the same cities over and over. Chen interrupted. You expand the same system to new worlds. You haven't created anything new in thousands of years. You've just copied, but we have peace. Zeth Prime protested. We have eliminated war, poverty, disease. You've eliminated choice, Chen said firmly. You've eliminated the possibility of failure, but you've also eliminated the possibility of real success. You've eliminated pain, but you've also eliminated joy. You've eliminated everything that makes life worth living. In the tense silence that followed, something unprecedented happened aboard the Confederation flagship. Crew members began to speak without being addressed, a violation of protocol so severe that it had never been contemplated. Consul, his seer said quietly, I've been studying their art. They create beauty from suffering. They make meaning from chaos. They find purpose in impossible situations. Sir, Stone Render added, his armored form shifting uncomfortably, my people were warriors once. We fought for honor, for glory, for the joy of battle. I had forgotten what that felt like until I saw these humans preparing to fight us. More voices joined in. A Quilimari navigator spoke of the songs his people used to sing before harmony was imposed. A Thrax engineer remembered the satisfaction of building something unique instead of following predetermined patterns. A Vorthak medic recalled the pride his people once felt in overcoming their savage nature through choice rather than compulsion. Consul, the communications officer said, we're receiving a transmission from the Confederation Council. Supreme Coordinator Velenoth is demanding an immediate status report. Zeth Prime looked around his bridge, seeing his crew as if for the first time. When had they become so uniform? When had their efficiency replaced their individuality? When had perfect order become perfect emptiness? Sir, Stone Render said, if I may what if the humans are right? What if we've forgotten what it means to be alive? The question was treason. The question was also the most important thing any of them had said in centuries. Zeth Prime made a decision that would echo through galactic history. He opened a channel to Earth. President Chen, he said, I want to make you an offer. Not from the Confederation, but from me personally. What if what if we don't conquer you? What if we learn from you instead? The human's expression shifted, from resignation to surprise to something that might have been hope. What are you proposing? I don't know, Zeth Prime admitted, and the honesty of that statement was like a breath of fresh air in the sterile perfection of his bridge. For the first time in my life, I truly don't know what comes next, and that terrifies me and excites me. Consul, his aide whispered urgently, the Supreme Coordinator is demanding immediate compliance with pacification protocols. Zeth Prime looked at the transmission request, then at his crew, then at the image of Earth on his screen. Humanity had chosen freedom over safety. Perhaps it was time for someone else to make the same choice. Tell the Supreme Coordinator, he said slowly, that Consul Zeth Prime respectfully declines to follow her orders. The bridge erupted in harmonized gasps from a dozen species. What the Consul had just done was unprecedented, impossible, and completely logical all at the same time. The consequences were immediate and dramatic. Within hours, the Confederation Council had declared Consul Zeth Prime a rogue agent and dispatched a fleet to arrest him. But something unexpected happened. Half his crew refused to be transferred to other ships. Then ships from other fleets began requesting permission to join the growing rebellion. For the first time in 50,000 years, the Confederation faced internal dissent. The concept spread like wildfire through the galactic community. Species that had forgotten their own independence began to remember what they had lost. Worlds that had accepted peaceful subjugation began to question whether peace was worth the price they had paid. Consul, President Chen said during one of their daily communications, what have we done? Zeth Prime, now commanding a fleet of 300 ships crewed by beings from dozens of species, looked at the tactical display showing both Earth and the approaching Confederation enforcement fleet. I believe, President Chen, that we have started something that should have begun long ago. And what's that? A revolution, not against the Confederation, but against the idea that security is more important than freedom. That order is more valuable than choice. That survival is worth more than the right to determine your own destiny. The irony wasn't lost on him. Humanity, the species that had never left their own solar system, had somehow sparked a galactic civil war simply by saying no. The enforcement fleet will arrive in 6 days, Stone Render reported. We'll be outnumbered 50-1. Then we'll lose, Zeth Prime said calmly. But we'll lose as free beings, not as servants, President Chen smiled on the screen. Now you're starting to understand what it means to be human. No, the consul replied. I'm starting to understand what it means to be alive. Epilogue. The word that changed everything. The Battle of Earth lasted 3 days. The Confederation fleet, with its overwhelming technological advantage and superior numbers, should have won within hours, but they faced something they had never encountered before, an enemy that fought not to win, but to prove that they could fight at all. The rebels used tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They sacrificed themselves to save others. They fought impossible odds with fierce joy. They turned every defeat into a moral victory and every victory into inspiration for others. When the smoke cleared, the Confederation had technically won, but their victory was hollow. The galaxy watched as 300 ships crewed by inferior species held off the might of the Confederation for 3 full days. They watched as beings who had been considered pacified and controlled rediscovered their capacity for choice. Most importantly, they watched as humanity, facing complete annihilation, broadcast one final message to the galaxy: we chose freedom. What will you choose? The answer came in the form of 1,000 rebellions across 1,000 worlds. The Confederation's perfect order began to crumble as species after species remembered what they had traded away for security. The galaxy would never be the same. And it all started with a single word, spoken by a species that had never traveled beyond their own solar system, to beings who had conquered half the galaxy. No, in the end, the Galactic Confederation learned a lesson that would reshape their understanding of civilization itself. Sometimes the most primitive response is also the most advanced. Sometimes the most illogical choice is also the most intelligent. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can say to power is not "I'll fight you" or "I'll defeat you," but simply, "I won't submit." The humans of Earth had given the galaxy a gift more precious than any technology, the reminder that freedom, not safety, is the highest virtue of intelligent life. And all it cost was everything they had. But as President Chen said in her final broadcast, just before the Confederation ships opened fire, some things are worth more than survival. Some things are worth more than safety. Some things are worth more than life itself. And one of those things, the right to say no, the word that changed everything, was small, simple, and absolute. It was the word that reminded the galaxy what it had forgotten, that the choice to be free is the choice to be fully alive.